Emma stood in the vast crystalline courtroom of the Zypherian Federation, her small human frame looking incredibly tiny beneath the towering alien structures that surrounded her from every direction. The walls were made of a material that glowed with a soft blue light, and they seemed to stretch upward forever into darkness. She had been arrested for accidentally wandering into a restricted orbital platform while exploring the trade station 3 days ago. Now she stood before Judge Kren, one of the most powerful beings in the entire galaxy. Judge Kren was not like anything Emma had ever seen before. His body was tall and thin, almost like a skeleton made of pure silver metal. His skin glowed with a faint purple light that pulsed gently with each breath he took. His eyes were large and oval-shaped, completely black except for a small white dot in the center that moved around as he looked at different things. He sat on a high throne that floated above the ground, and he looked down at Emma with no expression on his face at all. He had been a judge for over 300 years, and nothing in the entire universe could surprise him anymore. The courtroom was filled with other aliens. There were beings with multiple arms, beings that looked like floating clouds, beings with hard shells like insects, and creatures that Emma could not even describe because her mind could not understand what she was seeing. None of them paid any attention to Emma. They all sat quietly in their assigned places, watching the trial with complete disinterest. To them this was just another routine case. A human girl who had made a simple mistake meant nothing to them. Emma had not eaten in 2 days. Her stomach hurt badly. She felt dizzy and weak. Her hands were shaking, and she could barely stand up straight even though she tried very hard to keep her body still and calm. She knew that showing weakness in front of these powerful aliens was probably not a good idea, but she could not control her body anymore. The hunger was too much. The pain was too real. Judge Kren began asking Emma questions in a cold and flat voice. He wanted to know why she had entered the restricted area. He wanted to know if she had been trying to steal anything. He wanted to know if she had been working for any enemy governments or organizations. Emma tried her best to answer all of his questions clearly and honestly. She explained that she had simply gotten lost while exploring the station. She had not been trying to do anything illegal or dangerous. She had just made an innocent mistake. As Emma spoke, her voice kept getting quieter and quieter. She was finding it harder and harder to think clearly about what she wanted to say. Her mind felt foggy, like she was trying to think through a thick cloud. The hunger was making it impossible for her to concentrate properly. She kept losing her train of thought in the middle of sentences. She kept forgetting what she had just said. Judge Kren showed no reaction to anything Emma said. He simply listened to her words with absolutely no emotion on his face. He did not seem angry. He did not seem curious. He did not seem to care about Emma or her situation at all. He was simply following the protocol and asking the questions that he always asked in cases like this one. It was all routine to him. It was all part of his job. Then it happened. Emma's stomach made a very loud noise. It was a deep, rumbling sound that echoed through the entire courtroom. It was so loud and so unexpected that everyone turned to look at Emma. The other aliens suddenly became interested. Some of them tilted their heads. Some of them made strange clicking sounds. Some of them moved closer to see Emma better. Emma felt her face turn red with embarrassment. She looked down at the floor and tried to make herself as small as possible. She did not want anyone to look at her. She did not want anyone to notice what had just happened. But it was too late. Everyone had heard it. Everyone knew that her body was suffering from hunger and weakness. Judge Kren paused for a moment. He did something very strange. He stopped speaking. He simply sat there on his floating throne and stared down at Emma with those big black eyes. He did not move at all. He did not make any sound. The entire courtroom became completely silent. Even the other aliens stopped making their clicking and chirping sounds. Everyone was waiting to see what the judge would do next. Emma could not stand it anymore. The hunger was too much. The weakness was too much. The embarrassment was too much. She suddenly spoke up, interrupting the judge before he could say anything else. Her voice was shaky and desperate, but she spoke anyway. She had nothing left to lose. "Your Honor," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am very hungry. I have not eaten any food in 2 days. I do not feel well. My body hurts. I can barely think anymore." The courtroom exploded into chaos. The other aliens started making loud noises and moving around in their seats. Some of them seemed shocked. Some of them seemed confused. Some of them did not seem to understand what Emma had just said at all. They had never heard anything like this before. In their advanced civilization, hunger was not something that anyone ever had to experience. Hunger was a problem that they had solved thousands of years ago with technology and science. Judge Kren leaned forward slightly on his throne. His expression did not change, but something in his eyes seemed different now. Something had shifted inside him. He had heard something that he had never heard before in his entire 300-year lifetime. A creature was telling him that her body was suffering. A creature was showing him that she was vulnerable and weak and in pain. Judge Kren opened his mouth to speak. Everyone in the courtroom waited to hear what he would say. But before he could say anything at all, something very strange began to happen inside the judge's ancient mind. He was starting to feel something that he did not have a name for. It was a feeling that he had never felt before in all of his very long life. Judge Kren sat motionless on his floating throne, staring down at Emma with those large black eyes. The courtroom remained completely silent. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Everyone was waiting to see how the judge would respond to what Emma had just said. In all of recorded history, no one had ever interrupted a trial to mention hunger. It was considered completely inappropriate and disrespectful to the court proceedings. Finally, Judge Kren spoke. His voice was cold and logical, exactly like it had been before. "You have interrupted these proceedings to discuss your metabolic state," he said slowly and carefully. "Explain the relevance of your biological hunger to this formal trial. Explain how your personal discomfort relates to the charges against you." Emma felt confused by his response. She had expected him to either help her or become angry with her. She had not expected him to simply ask her to explain herself. But she tried anyway. Her voice was still shaky and weak, but she spoke as clearly as she could manage. "Your Honor," Emma began, trying to find the right words. "When I am hungry I cannot think properly. My mind gets foggy. My body gets weak. It is hard for me to stand up or move around. The hunger causes me physical pain. It is not just discomfort. It is real pain that makes everything harder." The other aliens in the courtroom began making strange sounds to each other. Some of them made clicking noises. Some of them made high-pitched whistling sounds. Some of them made deep rumbling sounds that seemed to come from inside their bodies. They were clearly discussing what Emma had said, but their conversation was completely incomprehensible to her. She could not understand any of their languages. An alien named Vextier, who had 3 long arms and skin that looked like smooth glass, turned to his neighbor and made a series of clicking sounds. Then he made a gesture with one of his arms that seemed to point at Emma. His neighbor, a being that looked like a floating purple jellyfish, responded with a series of high-pitched whistles. Their conversation seemed very animated and excited. Judge Kren raised one of his long thin hands, and immediately the entire courtroom fell silent again. Everyone turned their attention back to the trial. The judge looked down at Emma with an expression that seemed to contain something like confusion, though Emma could not be completely sure. The judge had such an alien face that it was very difficult for her to read his emotions or understand what he was thinking. "I have accessed the biological records of your species," Judge Kren said in his cold, flat voice. "Humans require regular consumption of nutrients and water to maintain basic bodily functions. This is a well-known fact. I do not understand why you are mentioning this to me as though it is something unusual or surprising. All biological beings require food. This is not relevant to your trial." Emma felt frustrated by his response. "But Your Honor, I have not had any food in 2 days. My body is suffering. I cannot think clearly. It is very difficult for me to stand here and answer your questions when I feel this way." Judge Kren seemed to process this information. He was a being of pure logic and reason. His species had evolved past the need for emotions a very long time ago. They made all of their decisions based on facts and logic. Emotions were considered to be illogical and therefore unimportant. To Judge Kren, the fact that Emma was hungry was simply a fact. It had no emotional component. It had no special importance. It was simply the current state of her body. "Your species has had access to food since your arrival at this station," Judge Kren said. "You have chosen not to consume it. This is a choice that you have made. I do not understand why you are now presenting your hunger as a problem that requires my attention." Emma opened her mouth to respond, but then she closed it again. She realized that there was a fundamental difference between how she thought about hunger and how the judge thought about it. To Emma, hunger was something that felt urgent and important and real. To Judge Kren, hunger was simply a biological fact that could be easily solved with technology. It meant nothing to him. It was not important. Other aliens in the courtroom began to show curiosity about the discussion. An alien with 6 eyes arranged in 2 rows on its head leaned forward to get a better look at Emma. A tall, thin alien with skin that looked like tree bark made a low groaning sound, as if it was trying to think very hard about what Emma had said. Judge Kren continued speaking. "In my 300 years as a judge, I have never encountered a situation like this one. Your species is young compared to the civilizations of this galaxy. We have solved many problems that your people still struggle with. Hunger is one of them. On my planet, we eliminated hunger millions of years ago. We take nutrient tablets that contain everything our bodies need. We consume them in approximately 60 seconds. Then we never think about hunger again. Emma listened to what the judge was saying, and she began to understand the problem. These aliens had technology that made hunger completely meaningless to them. They had never experienced what she was experiencing right now. They had never felt the desperation and pain and despair that came with true hunger. To them it was simply not a real problem anymore. Your Honor, Emma said quietly, I understand that your people have solved this problem. But my people have not. When humans are hungry we suffer. We feel pain. We cannot think clearly. We become weaker and weaker. If we do not eat for long enough we die. The courtroom became very quiet after Emma said this word. The aliens did not often think about death anymore. Most of them lived for hundreds of years or even longer. Death was something that happened to primitive species, not to advanced civilizations like theirs. Judge Kren tilted his head slightly. His expression did not change, but something in his black eyes seemed different now. Something had shifted. He had just learned something about humanity that was completely foreign to his way of thinking. Judge Kren sat very still on his floating throne. He did not move for almost 5 full minutes. Everyone in the courtroom watched him and waited. The other aliens began to make quiet clicking and whistling sounds to each other. They seemed confused about what was happening. They had never seen Judge Kren pause like this before. He was always ready with immediate answers and logical solutions. Finally, Judge Kren stood up from his throne. His tall, thin body seemed to stretch upward even further. He looked down at Emma for a long moment without saying anything at all. Then he spoke in a voice that was different from before. It was still cold and logical, but there was something else in it now. Something that Emma could not quite identify. This trial is adjourned, Judge Kren announced to the entire courtroom. We will resume in 2 hours. Emma, you will be taken to the holding chamber. You will be given food and water. You will rest. The alien guards came and escorted Emma away from the courtroom. She was led through long corridors of the space station. The guards did not speak to her. They simply guided her through door after door until they finally reached a small room. The room had a bed, a table, and a chair. On the table was a large plate of food. There was bread, fruit, vegetables, and water. Emma stared at it all for a moment, unable to believe what she was seeing. She sat down at the table and began to eat. At first, she ate slowly because her stomach was not used to receiving food anymore. But then she began to eat faster and faster. The food was delicious. It was real food, not some kind of artificial nutrient tablet. It had flavor and texture and substance. She ate everything that was on the plate and then she drank the entire glass of water. When she finished, Emma sat back in her chair and felt her body relax for the first time in days. The pain in her stomach was gone. Her mind felt clearer. She could think again. She could focus. The weakness in her body was slowly beginning to fade away. Meanwhile, in his private chamber, Judge Kren was doing something very unusual. He was accessing the complete historical database of Earth. He had decided that he needed to understand humanity better. He needed to understand why Emma's words had affected him so much. Judge Kren's mind moved through human history like a bullet. He saw images of wars. He saw images of famines. He saw images of humans fighting each other over food and resources. He saw images of cities that had been built in harsh deserts where nothing grew naturally. He saw images of people working in fields under burning sun, struggling to grow enough food to survive. He saw entire civilizations that had fallen because they did not have enough food. Then Judge Kren saw something else. He saw images of humans creating art during times of terrible suffering. He saw images of music being played in prison camps. He saw images of poetry being written on the walls of caves while people were starving. He saw images of humans helping each other, sharing their food even when they did not have enough themselves. He saw humans continuing to love each other and care for each other even when their bodies were weak and suffering. Judge Kren accessed information about human wars. He learned that humans fought wars while they were starving. They fought wars while their bodies were weak and hurt. They fought wars while they were dying of disease and hunger. Yet they continued to fight because they believed in something. They fought for their families. They fought for their homes. They fought for their freedom. Judge Kren then looked at the history of his own species. He saw that the Zytherians had indeed solved the problem of hunger millions of years ago. They had created technology that allowed them to live perfectly comfortable lives. They had eliminated pain, suffering, and scarcity. Every Zytherian lived in perfect comfort and perfect safety. But as Judge Kren looked deeper into his own history, he saw something troubling. He saw that after they had eliminated hunger and suffering, something else had disappeared too. His people had stopped creating art. They had stopped writing poetry. They had stopped making music. They had stopped fighting for causes that they believed in. They had stopped taking risks. They had stopped exploring the unknown. They had stopped growing. The Zytherians lived very long lives, but their lives were empty. They went through their days with no real purpose. They did not struggle. They did not suffer. But they also did not truly live. Judge Kren understood now what Emma had shown him. Humans did not just survive hunger and suffering. Humans actually grew stronger because of it. Humans created meaning out of their struggles. Humans found purpose in overcoming difficulties. Humans became better versions of themselves by facing challenges and obstacles. Judge Kren realized something profound. By eliminating all struggle from their civilization, the Zytherians had also eliminated the thing that made life worth living. They had eliminated the opportunity to become stronger. They had eliminated the opportunity to grow and change and improve. They had eliminated the opportunity to discover what they were truly capable of. A young human girl, standing in his courtroom with hunger written all over her face, had just taught him more about life than he had learned in 300 years. Judge Kren accessed his communication system and sent a message to the Federation Council. He requested an emergency meeting to discuss humanity. He requested that they review all of human history. He requested that they reconsider humanity's status in the galaxy. When Emma woke up from her rest in the holding chamber, she did not know that a single conversation about her hunger had just changed the entire course of galactic history. Emma stood in the courtroom again. She felt much better now after eating and resting. Her body was strong again. Her mind was clear. She could think properly. But she was still nervous about what was going to happen next. She did not know what Judge Kren had decided about her case. She did not know if he was going to find her guilty or innocent. The courtroom was fuller now than it had been before. There were more aliens present. Some of them Emma had never seen before. They sat in the upper levels of the courtroom, looking down at the proceedings with great interest. Something was different about this trial now. Something had changed. Judge Kren entered the courtroom and everyone immediately became silent. He walked to his floating throne and sat down slowly. He looked directly at Emma, and his expression was very serious. He seemed to be thinking about something very important. Emma, Judge Kren said, his voice echoing through the courtroom. I have spent the last 2 hours studying the complete history of your species. I have reviewed thousands of years of human civilization. I have seen your wars. I have seen your struggles. I have seen your art and your music and your literature. And I must tell you something that I have never told anyone before. Emma held her breath. She was not sure what was coming. Your species is extraordinary, Judge Kren continued. Not because of your technology. Not because of your weapons or your ships or your resources. Your species is extraordinary because you survive. Because you struggle. Because you continue moving forward even when everything is taken from you. The other aliens in the courtroom began making excited sounds. Some of them seemed shocked by what the judge was saying. Some of them seemed confused. Judge Kren raised his hand and silence returned immediately. I have discovered something that troubles me, the judge said. I have discovered that my own species eliminated struggle from our civilization millions of years ago. We eliminated hunger. We eliminated pain. We eliminated suffering. We believed that this was progress. We believed that this was the ultimate achievement of civilization. Judge Kren paused and looked around the courtroom at the other aliens. But in eliminating suffering, we also eliminated growth. We eliminated purpose. We eliminated the very thing that makes life worth living. We live long lives, but our lives are empty. We go through our days without meaning or purpose or goal. We do not struggle because we do not need to. But without struggle, we do not become stronger. Without challenge, we do not grow. Emma listened carefully to every word. She was beginning to understand something very important. When Emma told me that she was hungry, I did not understand why this was important, Judge Kren said. I thought it was simply a biological fact that had no special meaning. But I was wrong. Emma's hunger meant something. It meant that she was alive. It meant that she was struggling. It meant that she was continuing forward despite difficulty. This is something that my species has forgotten how to do. Judge Kren stood up from his throne. His tall body seemed to fill the entire courtroom. Therefore, I make the following decision, he announced. All charges against Emma are dismissed immediately. She will not be punished. She will not be imprisoned. She will be freed. The courtroom erupted in loud noise. The other aliens were shocked by this decision. They had never heard Judge Kren dismiss charges without proper legal reasoning. They had never heard him make a decision based on something other than pure logic and facts. But Judge Kren was not finished yet. He continued speaking, his voice rising above the noise of the courtroom. Furthermore, I am recommending to the Federation Council that humanity be granted official status as a protected species. I am recommending that humanity be recognized as a civilization of great value to the entire galactic community. Not because of what you have achieved through technology, but because of what you have achieved through survival and struggle and determination. Judge Kren looked directly at Emma. You came to our world as a prisoner. But you will leave as an ambassador. You will tell your people that they are valued. You will tell them that they are respected. You will tell them that their struggle is not weakness. Their struggle is strength. Emma felt tears running down her face. She had not expected any of this. She had expected to be punished, not freed. She had expected to be treated as a criminal, not as an ambassador. One of the other aliens, a being with multiple arms, stood up and made a loud clicking sound. It was a sound of protest. Judge Kren, this alien said, you are making decisions based on emotions, not logic. This is not appropriate for a judge. This is not appropriate for a civilization as advanced as ours. Judge Kren turned to look at this alien. Perhaps, he said slowly, emotions are not a sign of weakness. Perhaps emotions are a sign of understanding. Perhaps by eliminating emotions from our civilization, we have eliminated the very thing that makes us capable of true wisdom. The courtroom fell into stunned silence. No one had ever heard a Zytherian judge say something like this before. Judge Kren turned back to Emma. You are free to go, Emma. You are free to return to your people. But first, I would like to ask you something. Of course, Your Honor, Emma said quietly. What is it like? Judge Kren asked. What is it like to struggle? What is it like to suffer and continue forward anyway? What is it like to find meaning in difficulty? Emma thought about this question carefully. She thought about all the hard things that humans had to face. She thought about hunger and pain and loss and fear. But she also thought about how humans found strength in these things. She thought about how humans helped each other. She thought about how humans created beauty even in the darkness. Your Honor, Emma said, it is hard. But it is real. And real is better than perfect emptiness. Judge Kren nodded slowly. I believe you are correct, he said. And I believe our entire civilization needs to learn this lesson. The news spread across the entire Zytherian Federation like a wave moving across water. A judge had dismissed charges based on emotional reasoning. A judge had recommended that a young primitive species be recognized as valuable to the galactic community. A judge had said that the elimination of suffering might not be the greatest achievement after all. Within hours, every alien species in the Federation was discussing what had happened in Judge Kren's courtroom. The Federation Council called an emergency meeting. Leaders and representatives from 100 different alien civilizations came together to discuss Judge Kren's recommendation. Some of them were angry. Some of them were confused. Some of them were intrigued and wanted to learn more about humanity. An old alien named Vexthar, who had lived for over 500 years, stood up and spoke to the entire council. His voice was deep and wise from many centuries of life. I have studied many civilizations across this galaxy, Vexthar said. I have seen species that are far more advanced than we are. I have seen technology that would seem like magic to our people. But I have never seen a species that continues forward the way humans do. Humans do not have our technology. Humans do not have our advanced science. But humans have something that we have lost. What do they have? Asked another alien council member, a being made of pure energy. They have will, Vexthar answered simply. They have the will to survive. They have the will to grow. They have the will to create beauty and meaning even when their lives are difficult and painful. This is something that we cannot create with our technology. This is something that we can only learn from them. The Federation Council voted to accept Judge Kren's recommendation. Humanity was officially recognized as a protected species by the entire galactic community. This was a historic moment. This was the first time in thousands of years that a young species had been granted this honor. Emma was taken to a special chamber where she could communicate with Earth. She sent messages to the governments of her world, telling them what had happened. She told them that humanity was now recognized by the galactic community. She told them that they were valued and respected. The news caused celebration and excitement all across Earth. Humans had wondered for so long if they were alone in the universe. Now they knew they were not alone and they were welcome. The Federation Council decided to create a new research program called the Institute of Human Understanding. Scientists from many different alien species came to work at this institute. They wanted to study humanity. They wanted to understand how humans could be so strong and so creative and so determined despite having to struggle with hunger and pain and scarcity. One of the first researchers to arrive at the institute was a scientist named Kel. Kel was from a species that had evolved to be extremely intelligent. They could process information faster than any other species in the galaxy. But they had never experienced struggle. They had never felt hunger. They had never faced a real challenge in their entire lives. Kel began studying human history very carefully. She watched videos of humans working in fields under burning sun. She read books about humans fighting wars and overcoming enemies. She listened to music that humans had created during times of great suffering. And slowly, Kel began to understand something that she had never understood before. The humans are not just surviving, Kel said to the other researchers. They are using their suffering to become stronger. They are using their limitations to become more creative. Every time a human faces a problem, they find a new solution. Every time a human experiences pain, they find a new way to create beauty. This is remarkable. Other alien species began to change their perspectives on what it meant to live a good life. Some species decided to introduce small amounts of challenge back into their civilizations. They decided that maybe constant comfort was not the same thing as happiness. They decided that maybe struggle had value after all. Judge Kren visited Emma in her chamber before she was scheduled to return to Earth. He looked different now. He seemed less cold and logical. He seemed more thoughtful and contemplative. Emma, Judge Kren said, I want to thank you. You have changed my entire civilization just by speaking the truth about your hunger. You have made us question everything we believed about progress and achievement. Emma looked up at the tall alien judge. I did not do anything special, Your Honor. I just told you that I was hungry. That is exactly the point, Judge Kren said. You did something that my species has forgotten how to do. You were honest about your weakness. You did not try to hide your struggle. You did not try to pretend to be stronger than you were. And in doing so, you showed us something very important. You showed us that real strength comes from accepting our struggles and continuing forward anyway. Judge Kren reached out and placed one of his long, thin hands on Emma's shoulder. It was a gesture of respect and friendship. When you return to your world, tell your people that they are pioneers, Judge Kren said. Tell them that they are showing the entire galaxy what it means to truly live. Tell them that their struggle is not a weakness. Their struggle is their greatest strength. Emma returned to Earth as a hero. She told everyone about her experience with the Zytherian Federation. She told them about Judge Kren and about the other aliens who had recognized humanity's value. The story spread across the entire planet. Humans began to see their struggles differently. They began to see their determination and their will to survive as something beautiful and powerful. The Federation Council established official contact with Earth. Trade routes were opened. Cultural exchanges were arranged. Alien scientists came to Earth to study human art, music, and literature. Human scientists went to other worlds to learn about different civilizations. But most importantly, the entire galaxy's perspective on what it meant to be alive had changed. Species that had eliminated all struggle began to question whether they had made the right choice. Young species that were still struggling began to see their challenges as opportunities for growth instead of problems to be solved immediately. Emma had come to the Zytherian Federation as a prisoner accused of a crime. She had left as a bridge between worlds. One human girl had changed the destiny of the entire galactic community simply by being honest about her hunger. Her courage had sparked a revolution in how billions of beings thought about life itself.